the commander-in-chief needs to have the authority to do that. But if it's a longer operation and it expands, then it becomes something he has to come before Congress for. Whether or not Congress declares war, there needs to be an authorization for use of military force if the conflict gets broadened. And then that's a debate we have on how broad is it and does it bring it to this point. I am disappointed that he didn't call us in with classified briefings and prepare the knowledge base in the Congress. If there's a rationale for this, he needed to inform the Congress. He didn't do that. He did call in a handful of leaders, and not very many at that, 18 hours before, and said this strike's going to take place. There was not consultation. And so where I'm going to go back to Washington next week, Monday or Tuesday, and start the pressure for classified briefings. I want to follow the rationale of this foreign policy. I can't follow it. I do support our military, and I support their mission, but I want to be able to do it from a informed base, and I think they've got an obligation to do that.
Well, you can only support their mission if you know what it is.
Well,
I mean, just because it's the military, their mission might be just incoherent as their leadership.
But I do support covert missions from time to time, Jan, and I don't know what they are. If I do, I can't say.
Well, this isn't covert. We're bombing
covert.
airports and military, and now we have the Secretary of Defense encouraging the army of Syria to rise up and engage in revolutionary activity. We have the jurisdiction to be doing that stuff, and nor do we have the resources even to support all of this mischief.
If this were part of a plan, I mean, Bush had a Bush doctrine, at least, where he said, we want to provide the foundation for freedom and liberty so people can control their own destiny, and they'll turn their focus from building bombs and hatred to raising their families, taking care of their neighborhoods, and building their mosques or whatever they decide to do. That's the Bush doctrine. Eradicate the habitat that breeds terrorists. And there's an argument to be made that there's an accomplishment that has been achieved in Iraq that may happen in Afghanistan, not as optimistic by any means. And you can look at that map and see how the Bush doctrine is actually fitting in place. But is this the Obama doctrine? And if it is, come articulate it to the American people so that we can follow a coherent proposal. And if you can't do that, then we will have to start raising the issues like you've done here today. Well, I'm astonished at this.
How about just let's ignore the pockets of places that produce terrorism as long as they're committing their acts against themselves. And we come over here and we sever our international ties with OPEC oil-producing countries as much as possible. Instead of funding Islamicism worldwide through our oil purchases, let's develop our own blanking resources and wave at those people as we fondly bid them adieu into the coal bin, dustbin of history.
We can become energy independent in this country. If we had a coherent plan when we first decided to do this back in 1979 under the Carter administration, we'd have been there by now. But we have the EPA shutting down operation after operation, a president who has signed an executive order to shut down the drilling in the Gulf Coast immediately before he knew what caused the leak in the spill. And now I sat in on a briefing that the numbers, I believe, were that there were 4 major platforms drilling in the Gulf Coast. They were all shut down by the executive order. These are deep water rigs. 3 of them have left essentially the hemisphere. It will take 5 years to get them back if we can get them back, and another 2 years to get some production out of that.
Well, while we're encouraging the Chinese and the Brazilians to do those kinds, encouraging them to do the drilling that the United States won't. And what the heck is going on with that?
And you've got World Bank money that's part U.S. money that's being loaned to the Brazilians
to
develop their oil fields.
Don't pile on. Now, come on.
Jan, I thought you were going to come cheer me up this morning, so I've given up on that.
I am seriously distressed about almost every element of what's passing for leadership in Washington. It's almost as if a bunch of children with no historical perspective have been given the car keys to somebody else's fleet and with unlimited gas supply and credit cards. Just go play bumper cars with all these fine automobiles until the wheels fall off. Well, I am hoping, and I absolutely am encouraged that you're doing this Conservative Principles Conference, because rather than just railing and constantly railing about the ineptitude and evil of what's going on, I hope we'll hear a lot of practical, doable, actionable steps can be taken to stop the damage and then do some repair work.
And that's my hope too, Jan. In fact, I did a different interview this morning, and they talked about what I hope to accomplish at the Conservative Principles Conference tomorrow. That goes on all day here in Des Moines at the downtown Marriott. And it is this, that we can go there and spend the whole day railing about what's wrong. We have a pretty good idea on what's wrong.
Absolutely.
But I want to challenge the presidential candidates and the other leading thinkers. Provide the path to the next level of Americans' destiny. And I mean up, not down. I don't mean diminishing our destiny. I think Ronald Reagan said, we're going to build a shining city on the hill, and to a large degree we've done that. But there's another level there. It isn't now go sit up in your castle on the hill. It's take this country to another level. And I want to see these candidates paint that vision. I want to see the vision thing, and it needs to be with coherent policy objectives at the same time. I'm really looking forward to Ambassador John Bolton's presentation with all of this going on in the Middle East, Libya in particular, but also this Syrian issue that you've brought up this morning that I wasn't aware of. I'd like to know his take on the administration. But I talk to the leading foreign policy thinkers, and I have private conversations with them. I probe into their mind. I get them to answer and not answer, and then I know what they think, or at least I've got a real good idea. And I can't find at least conservative thinkers that can identify a foreign policy theme in this president. And you've just said the same thing. There's not a theme out there. There's not a consistency. There's not an agenda that is being worked on day by day.
I think it can be distilled to some romantic notions. They accurately view what's going on in the Middle East, and for the last hundreds and hundreds of years, in the last century, years specifically, that oppression exists in the Middle East. Almost all of the Middle East countries are Islamic and oppressive and are authoritarian, either by generals, in pretend generals or Colonel Gaddafi types, or Islamic-based clerics, or whatever fascist gets in control. It's all of the oil and the revenue, gets to live like a prince while everybody else gets hosed out in the cheap seats. And they see that iniquity and that as an actual iniquity. It certainly is. But the romantic notion is if we just destabilize all of those countries and replace and offer them an opportunity of, quote, self-government and self-determination, good things will happen out of that instability. That's the romantic notion of the French Revolution. All it did was release a bloodbath, and the French have never recovered from it. In the Middle East, when they have no Western idea of democracy, no expectation of it, and you have inshallah, a fatalistic view of God and His will, you have no ability to resist evil. You have no mandate to resist evil because whatever exists is God's will. You have a formula for devastation like we have never seen before.
Well, Jan, I have a little bit higher level of optimism than you've expressed here, but I won't say either that I can.
I'm trying to cure you of that, sir.
I don't know that I can rebut all of those points, or know that I should, because I think you make some good ones. And I have to say this, that here in this country, this democracy, which we know to be this republic, it was very fragile, and it's still fragile.
It's non-existent. We don't have a republic anymore.
Well, I have to say we do. We're a constitutional republic. The structure of our government is a Republican form of government, as it's required by the Constitution. And even though that the bounds of the enumerated powers have been stretched to the point where it's hard to recognize some of them, we still represent regions of people and show up in a Congress.
We still have some mechanisms. We still have some at our disposal where we are still capable of affecting change by the selection of our leadership. But to say that we still have a constitutional republic, it would be difficult to assert that anymore because the Constitution is the most ignored document on the planet. We still have some pro forma pieces of it left. In my lifetime, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. Now, that's just cavalierly stated. He took us off the gold standard. I guess we're now all Keynesians. He took us off the gold standard. Where in the Constitution does it allow the president to take us off the gold standard?
Well, I don't know where in the Constitution it requires that we would be beyond one.
You don't?
No, I don't.
Says the states can require nothing but gold and silver for the payment of debt. That's explicit, Constitution.
That's the states.
We are the creator of the federal government.
But the federal government, the national currency, can you point to a constitution that requires that the national currency be on the gold standard?
I would say it's implied by the gold and silver mandate.
Okay. I won't take issue with the implications because I know that you read Skousen, and that's probably anchored right in there, and so I'll recognize that. This has crept away, but I'd go the other way on this. Let's look at the things we have left.
Okay.
We have our freedom of speech right now, and I'm really happy to have that.
Me too.
We can't save this country unless you and I and everybody else in it can speak freely. We have freedom of religion, even though it gets distorted in many ways, and we've had a pretty nasty
We
debate
have a
on
lot
that.
of tools at our disposal. I agree with you, and I don't mean to be the half-empty glass kind of guy here, but that's sort of my job.
Well,